Have you heard any blockchain founders get on stage?
I saw one this morning and I think he got roasted. And I was like, well, okay, I'm going to be careful.
Is he lying?
That's the same question I asked my co-founder too.
You're going to be rich. Well done.
Thank you.
You might think I'm running the wrong set of experiments, but I can first establish the world, then at least we can have the rest of the conversation. What's your name?
Albert.
Albert. So you're going to have a minute to tell us what you're building and get some feedback. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. What are you building?
So we're building Clipp. It's AI-powered order management software for food suppliers to reduce their labor and food waste. So we go to the food supplier, we connect them to hundreds of restaurants on an app that's very similar to DoorDash. And when the restaurant closes down, they put in their orders in, and the supplier will receive the orders through a dashboard and process it as it moves to the warehouse packer, truck driver, and eventually the restaurant, who receives the delivery and provides payments. And so a lot of these suppliers, most of them are still SMBs, and they're still taking orders by phone call, text, email, and fax. And with all these handoffs and inaccuracies, it leads them to 1% to 3% profit margins. And after COVID, what happened is that a lot of these workforce in this industry had left and never came back. And we're seeing these margins being pressured, and that's why we're building this software to help them today.
Under a minute. Good job. It's still yours. I've got one on me. First of all, you stuffed a lot of really great insights and touch and feel. I have questions, but I just want to point out something. People might counterintuitively, I'm going to be honest for the sake of everybody on the stage, thought this was a rough pitch because it went really fast, it was short, and it went a lot of places. However, more than any other pitch today, I could immediately feel the customer, what they were buying, what they were getting, and there is a lot of utility in that hides the all over the place, and there's a little bit of all over the placeness, which we'll get to the feedback that I want to give you, but like that hid that because it was just like, okay, as long as I can follow how fast you're talking, and I'm a fast talker too, and I could, then I was like, I'm in, cool, I have questions, but like I at least get the top of funnel. So good job there because again, I think I get what the product is, I can touch and feel it. And now all of my questions are going to be, okay, what's the market around this and the complication of the business model and logistics. So good job on that top of funnel. Just real quickly, I think there's a little bit of nervousness. Obviously, there's lights and cameras, but for you in particular, I'm going to recommend whenever you're giving a pitch, try to find your way to slow yourself down, but also enunciate at key moments. There's a lot of you talking fast, and again, I don't talk fast. I'm a mumbler as well, so I'm good at this. A lot of people aren't. When you're going, 1,000 miles an hour, you're going to lose somebody, and the sad part is other people won't be as enthusiastic to try to find their way back to your story in terms of once they're lost, they're going to go, great, I'm lost. I'm going to afterwards say, hey, thanks for sharing, and walk away. So imperative on you to practice and just get those reps in and polish the front of your pitch, so to speak. Let's get to the product a little bit. You said the word DoorDash, but it doesn't sound like a marketplace. Correct or incorrect?
Correct. We use that as an analogy because a lot of people know what DoorDash is, but we found that when we didn't include that, people are like, what are food suppliers? What are they hiding behind the scenes? And we kind of lose them a little bit. So we use that
using it as basically a UI analogy.
Basically.
I would just find a different analogy because the one fear you should have about using that is the thing that happened to me. I at first thought you were a marketplace because you mentioned DoorDash. Mm-hmm. Then I realized you weren't when you described you then went into like most food suppliers are SMBs and they're taking these orders. I was like, oh, okay. He's not a marketplace anymore, I don't think. But I wasn't sure because that analogy leaves open this idea of right. DoorDash as a marketplace. So again, just find another app that maybe has a similar dynamic. It might be challenging, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So you are sitting, whose product are you? You're the food supplier's product. They're the ones buying you a SaaS?
Yes, correct.
And they are replacing phone and paper right now.
Phone and paper, QuickBooks Desktop, Excel, or some custom-built software that they built 10 years, 15, 20 years ago.
There's no competitor in the space?
There are some competitors. So I call them the SAP and Oracles of the world, but they target the Goliaths of the industry, like the US Foods, the Ciscos. There's about 100 of them. But everybody else is kind of left in the dust right now.
Because they're so legacy old and big market, big contracts.
Exactly.
And I assume the reason they don't want to go down market is because these folks would not be profitable for them for their unit economics.
That's number one. But number two, the tools that they build are designed by people that are like you and I. They have university degrees, they know computer engineering. But the people that we're selling into, they're very similar to the parents of immigrant families. They don't know what Uber Eats is. They don't know what DoorDash is. They may have dropped out of high school. English is their second language. And that kind of ICP is very different from the people that are building it. I think what's different here is that my co-founder used to import 80% of all garlic and ginger into the US Northeast. So he was actually in the warehouse chasing down for those bills, packing those boxes. And so he's seen those dynamics, and we're building the app around those dynamics as opposed to us building what we think is right and kind of pushing it down their throats.
I love this point you're making around how non-technical user is, again, pitch feedback, I think, involving that, in that first 60 seconds of, hey, you need to understand about most food suppliers. The people at these food suppliers not only don't have a solution right now, but for these SMB food suppliers, if you showed them an app that looked like DoorDash, they would run away.
Yeah,
right? And I think that feels true, feels novel, feels like a wedge and a moat in all sorts of ways. So it's a fun fact, not a fun fact, but it's a fun fact in a way that I want you to deliver earlier. So cost for them. You don't need to get specific, or you can if you want, but my worry there is I assume food suppliers have low margins.
Yes. 1 to 3%.
1 to 3%. So how do you charge?
So we charge them a take rate. It is 1 to 3%. But we reduce a lot of the costs.
So what's their margin as a business?
So
their typical margin?
Their net profit margins at the end of the day, they're left with 1 to 3% net profit margins. That's
food suppliers in general on average in the world.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
The reason the margins are so low is because they have teams of 20 to 30 people picking up phone calls and reading those emails and faxes. We go to the food supplier and we say, hey, you don't need 20 to 30 people. You only need maybe 3 to 5 people doing that. We bring down their cost basis immensely. And based on that, it's about a $1.3 million cost saving annually. And we charge them $300 to $400K per year as a SaaS fee. And that SaaS fee runs off how many ingredients that they're selling year to year.
I have broader storytelling and investor feedback here, but I have more founder questions first. So founder to founder questions. Do you want to have punitive pricing like that? Is it valuable versus going SaaS? Is it because you need to tell them it's risk-free, so it's free until we save you money? Why are you doing it that way?
So we put them on a 3 to 6 month free trial. As they onboard more and more of the restaurants, they'll see that the restaurants on our app take 10 minutes to process, but everything else takes an hour to process. Once they've kind of hit this kind of critical point, we then put them on that take rate model and then continue charging them like that.
The take rate. How far along are you?
So we have 12 suppliers that we've secured. We're onboarding 4 right now.
They're paying yet?
Yeah, one of them is food suppliers are paying.
I think all punitive business models, and I'll describe what I mean in a second, eventually don't look as good as their non-punitive counterparts. So the reason I'm calling this a punitive business model is it's punishing usage in a sense, as in you're doing a take rate off a differential in cost savings. You're saying, I'm going to save you money, and based on that, I'm going to charge you some amount of money. It's attractive, I think, for a lot of early stage founders because it allows you to have a risk-free initial trial, allows you to tell the business, I'm charging you in an incentive-aligned fashion, and it allows you to have a higher per customer revenue in those early days. I think the challenge is the business eventually feels weird about it because what is cost savings becomes a question. Do I actually let people go is the first thing. Most businesses, a lot of early SaaS companies will say, we'll help you shrink your team. You won't have to hire as many of these people, but they don't actually fire people, right? Or they don't realize that the headcount efficiency is caused by one SaaS tool. And then over time, the disconnect becomes even larger when they're like, we kept using this tool. Did we change our headcount? Our business grew, so we hired more people. Does this mean that the tool isn't working? Because we hired more people and they're still charging us money. And the ability for you to prove exactly what amount of money you're saving them becomes a little fuzzier. I say that to say, by the way, I'm excited about your business, right? So I'm asking this question again, founder to founder. Why not just figure out a free trial that allows these cost-sensitive food suppliers to start with you, but then do something more typical SaaS?
On a per seat basis, right?
Or probably per seat, yeah. Or maybe it's volume tiered.
Yeah, so before I got into this game with my co-founder, I asked him the exact same question. And surprisingly, commissions in this industry are paid based on existing sales. So if you're a salesperson at a food supplier and you sell $10 million worth of goods, the food supplier continues to pay them even if that customer is not a new customer. So they're already kind of used to this take rate concept. And we're saying, hey, we're not changing that at all, but we're bringing down your fixed cost basis down. You get to reduce your
but you see how that's different than a commission because the commission's on net new revenue. Or some amount of net revenue versus on a cost saving. Yeah.
So I think that might have caused a little bit of confusion. This take rate is on existing sales that are going out the door, not new sales.
Right. But your supposition to them is the reason I can charge you this is because I'm saving you money.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't need to get stuck in this because I think this is actually unimportant, other than the feedback I'll give you as to how to position it to investors.
No, that was helpful.
Yeah. And I'd say to investors, you kind of want to hide that you you can talk about doing this business model, but you maybe want to like pre-reveal that it doesn't need to be this way, unless you tell me it has to be this way. What I'm saying is like, you don't sound like the type of person that if, this scaled to another, you'd be happy to scale this to a bunch more suppliers, you might change your mind one day, or you might find another pricing model. It doesn't sound like you're philosophically committed to this pricing model. You've been convinced, and so far it's working, or you're going to see if it works. And I want to feel that in the way you pitch it too, because otherwise you also have to have the investor buy into this pricing model rather than buying into your value prop. I want you to think as a founder, let me go convince a bunch of investors, hey, these suppliers have a pain point. We have an initial hypothesis to a product and a business model, but either way, they have a pain point. We're going to solve it. This is how we think we're going to make money. By the way, that could change. How exactly we make money could change. And that should be the feeling you give when you answer questions around pricing and business model, rather than here's exactly how we do it. And why? Because this one feels a little more rigid, and then I have to buy into this too.
Right.
Don't make me buy into this yet.
Yeah. Makes sense.
What's going to be I find this like straightforward and compelling. What's going to be the challenge, the wall that you hit after I assume your first 20 customers, 30 customers are going to come from relationships, and it's going well because you get to sit with your customer today and show them some of this stuff manually. When you begin to struggle to scale, what's the obstacle that you've observed or your co-founders warned you about that's going to be the way that this becomes a challenging business that it isn't today?
Yeah, so there is a network play to this. The overall vision is to connect the entire food supply chain end to end. So from the farmer, the producer, all the way to the supplier, and then eventually to the restaurant. Right now, when the restaurant is ordering from the food distributor, they can also add suppliers that are not on our Clipp platform as well. So they're not filling with our app and 4 or 5 other clipboards. They can consolidate that entire workstream onto one app. And what that does is it helps us broaden our supplier network outside of my co-founder's network as well.
So you're gonna offer a marketplace as well?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
You answered my question by expanding the opportunity, but that's actually good. Interesting. It's very straightforward business. I mean, the funny truth of it is this is one of those startups that the only question becomes, I say this not about you. This is like a jokey way to say this, but like, is he lying?
That's the same question I asked my co-founder too.
Right. If you're not lying, then a competitor could come and compete with you, which could be the challenge. But yeah, if you're not lying, then I completely believe that suppliers are not digitally tech-enabled today. I believe digitally and tech-enabling them will be something they'll pay for in some fashion. I believe that restaurants won't mind this either. I think the only way restaurants would mind this is it makes their life hard, but I can't imagine how. I think the marketplace play is also interesting. I think you run into different challenges there, but I think that makes total sense because you're aggregating, normalizing, standardizing across suppliers, which is super fascinating. So are you lying? Sounds like no.
I had the same question, but I spent 6 months walking into these food suppliers and actually seeing how they actually printed streams of paper. They had racks of faxes, like 6, 7, 8 faxes on the floor or on the racks, literally coming out. And I talked to restaurant owners that were outside of his network just to be sure that it wasn't a problem that was just within his network, and internationally as well. And it seems like this problem is actually really widespread on both the supplier and the restaurant side.
Why has no one built this before?
I think it's an issue where people in Silicon Valley, and I used to work on Wall Street, we have this idea that we know what the solution is and we go into them when in fact these business owners are very proud of what they've built and they know they're doing the right thing. It's just that after COVID and the current macro environment is creating these forces that are making it harder to run the business. And it's changing things now for the very first time in their life. But for a while, the business was doing fine. They're doing millions of dollars, the 1% to 3% profit margins on $10 to $20 million of ingredients. That's actually millions of dollars.
I love this. I want to add something to what you just said, though. I just love what you said, though. Because what you're saying is these are proud, sometimes family-owned, sometimes just set in their ways folks who they prefer the phone to every digital solution that's been put in front of them. They say no to every tech founder that's come to them over the past 2 decades. And they know their way. Their fingers are almost automatic. They have muscle memory in what they're doing. But macro, global headwinds, has meant their 1% to 3% profit margins are at risk. They're struggling to put food on the table in the same way they used to. And so for the first time, they're open. And we're also open to listening to them and being very considerate about their workflow and how they want to work. And we're going to build it in a way where they're open to the opportunity for the first time. And we're a vendor that's building it for them for the first time. And so that's why it's being built for the first time. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. You got it.
You're going to be rich. Well done.
Thank you.
Good job. if you're curious about what happens after a pitch where like the only question is the founder lying, this is like a real thing, right? Some pitches are just so obvious. You're like, okay, they're either something that they've not revealed to me that I don't understand about the world, or a competitor will eat their lunch and both of them will drive their margins down to zero and no one will win. So there are things that can go wrong. But then the other things you do as an investor in that situation, as a founder, you have to be prepared for is, okay, how hard will it be truly after all the relationships are the thing, building the first dozen sales, 100 sales, 200 sales? What's the go-to-market to get the next 1,000 customers? What's going to be challenging about the next 1,000 customers? Is there actually a legacy competitor that cares earlier when they suddenly see this little player coming and taking some of their lunch? And so it's really digging into the weeds. And so again, it just becomes verifying a set of facts and deciding that the overall market is worth it from a financial perspective. Shall we welcome the last founder up? Let's do it. What's your name? Francesco.
Yeah.
You're going to have a minute to pitch. Tell us what you're building, get some feedback. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Let's do it. What are you building?
I'm Francesco, co-founder and CEO of Almanax. You've probably all heard of blockchain news, of blockchain hacks, and millions of dollars being stolen in cryptocurrencies. Well, I spent the past 4 years investigating these types of hacks as the head of product at a startup in San Francisco. What I noticed while I was doing this was that a lot of these hacks kept happening for the same reasons and could have been prevented with like better security tools. So I started a company, Almanax, to go and fill that gap. My co-founder was at Coinbase before and has a past in cybersecurity as well. And we're building, the long-term vision is to build an AI security engineer that can assist security teams in their day-to-day operations. The first product we built integrates into a customer code base, scans it with LLMs, and automatically finds issues and vulnerabilities before hackers do.
Under a minute. Good job. Have you ever been to the feedback loop before?
No, first time.
Have you watched?
I've watched a few things, yes.
Have you heard any blockchain founders get on stage?
I saw one this morning and I think he got roasted and I was like, well, okay, I'm going to be careful.
So the good news is we're in two different modes. So for those who don't know, I am probably the biggest, not just skeptic of blockchain and Web3. I'm anti. I'm an activist against. However, there's two things that are different about this conversation. One is it sounds picks and shovelsy, as in regardless of whether you believe in the thing, it exists, and therefore to build tools around it and to make it work in the world might make a lot of sense. And so I don't need to philosophically be aligned with blockchain or Web3 to be excited about it. And the second is, I don't know when this pitch was, but the election has changed how much Web3 I expect will unfortunately be part of our lives moving forward. Essentially, a bunch of VCs bought the victory in the Web3 versus Web2 fight. That's my perspective anyway. So I'm more open than I have been in a while to the concept of Web3 products being significant in the world.
Lucky me.
Lucky you, exactly. But you then at some point said AI security engineer, and I went and the solution sounded less specific. Let me sort that as my first question. Is this specific to blockchain stuff or not?
It is to start, right?
Okay.
And I realize it's a lot of buzzwords, AI, security, blockchain, like it's a challenge, right? We have as well when we pitch. It's unfortunately, and it's by design, on blockchain code, you have money at the protocol level. So if I hack Instagram, I steal customer information. And then I come to Mark Zuckerberg and I tell Mark Zuckerberg, hey, I have millions of customer information, pay me like a ransom, right? If I go and hack a blockchain application, I walk out the door with millions, sometimes like billions of dollars, right? So the higher the need for like security spending. The additional problem with blockchain, which is why we're starting in this market, is that there's a lack of security tools. Most of like the security today is outsourced to third-party cybersecurity vendors that literally look manually at every line of code to see whether there's issues or not. While in Web 2, you have like a plethora of like security tools that companies can use. So we're specifically going and filling that gap.
When you if you win and you're a large company, will you have more of a density of Web3 customers, or will it look like the world?
It's a great question, right? And it's one of the questions that we ask ourselves every day, because we started with languages that are specific to blockchain. Solidity, to start, it's like the main language for smart contracts on Ethereum. And now we expanded to Solana and Stellar, and their smart contracts are written in Rust. Now, Rust is used for a bunch of other applications. It's not just blockchain. And so why don't we expand immediately to like code that is not blockchain code? Right now, we want to be hyper-focused in like blockchain specific like type of vulnerability, because it's very important when it comes to security to have very high detection rate and very low like false positive rate, meaning that I catch as many issues I can catch while giving you as little alerts as possible, right? And so the thesis here is that the only way we can do this is by being hyper-specific and showing like the models as many types of vulnerabilities for chain.
Because you're training a model to pattern match.
That's right.
So the model being trained to detect certain anomalies makes sense, especially because I assume a lot of bad behavior in blockchain probably pattern matches against itself pretty nicely. But the rest of what you do, right? So there's some sort of detection model. What else is involved workflow and engineering-wise in terms of your product? In other words, there's a model doing kind of detection. What else is required for integration? What else is required for alerting? Give me more of the product.
Yeah, eventually you need to build around what developers are doing today and security teams are doing today. And so we integrate with their current workflows, like CI/CD pipelines. We integrate into code repositories, GitHub, etc. We might have an integration down the line into IDEs, VS Code, for example. To start, we started with GitHub repositories and CI/CD pipelines, so that every time a developer like pushes new code, like you have your security screen, you get alerts if there's something that doesn't look good, and you're ideally moving faster than a hacker, right? And you don't put vulnerabilities in production. So we think this is the only way that the technology will be adopted like more broadly.
So what's the model doing in that moment though?
It's a lot of stuff that happens in the background, right? Because in order to improve those two metrics that I was telling you about, detection rate and false positive rate, if you use an out-of-the-box LLM today, they're pretty poor in terms of performances, which is why a lot of people try it, and it's a hard problem to solve. And so we built a multi-agent architecture where we have multiple agents in the background that are checking each other's work. And at the beginning of the pipeline, we have a very wide net that we cast and very large funnel that then gets smaller as we get to the end of the funnel of what happens behind the curtain. And so while we catch a lot of stuff at the beginning, we only show certain like issues that we found to the end user.
This is all code analysis.
Yeah, that is all code analysis for now.
How much of blockchain bad behavior is detectable on code analysis side versus end application testing? In other words, I'm imagining some of the stuff, yes, you can use, especially with the help of AI, detect through code change that you've exposed a vulnerability. But a lot of it probably is so behavior or UX or UI based. Am I right or wrong about that? And how do you think about those post-production, again, from a production and engineering, not a movie perspective, post-production?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I'll break it down, right? If you look at the life cycle of a blockchain application, you have the development phase. Developers build for several months, and then they pause. They usually code freeze, and they go through a bunch extensive security. Well, not that extensive in blockchain, but they go through security testing, and then they deploy, right? And now it's live. Customers are using it. Once you launch, there's a continuous monitoring. There's a bunch of companies that we partner with to do continuous monitoring, threat detection, anti-money laundering. My previous company sold anti-money laundering software as well, right? So you look at behavior of certain wallets interacting with your application, and you decide that this is a bad actor because of X, Y, and Z. We're much more focused at the very beginning of the life cycle. It's what in cybersecurity they call shift left. So we want to catch these vulnerabilities and issues as early as possible.
Is it an analysis of code engineering product vulnerabilities, and that's most of it? Or is it an analysis of stuff that is unique to the vulnerabilities of blockchain I guess both can be products to me, right? But I guess I'm trying to figure out which you're more targeted at. Again, you're doing the shift left and you're trying to find it in top of funnel code. But I wonder in that top of funnel code, are you looking for like, hey, you don't realize you just kind of, from a blockchain perspective, here are a bunch of things you enabled that are going to be eventual security exposures on your application? Or is it's off, but in blockchain?
It seems like your question is more, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, you're asking, is this like it's an application issue, or is it like the protocol issue, like the blockchain itself?
Yeah.
It's a good question, right? Because like also like protocols get updated like often,
right?
And maybe they add like new functionalities, new features, like they increase latency or bandwidth. Well, they decrease latency, they increase bandwidth, and all that jazz. We focus right now, a lot of the data that we saw is more at the application layer, right? So if you're building a staking like protocol or a swapping protocol where you can swap between two currencies, you probably have a smart contracts in the background, right? Which encapsulate the logic of your application. And a smart contract is nothing more than lines of code that are deployed on the blockchain. So at the protocol level, right? At the infrastructure level. And so that has been the initial focus. Now we're starting to collaborate with teams at the infrastructure layer as well. Because again, some of this stuff is written in code that now we can understand and we can identify issues of. And so it doesn't necessarily need to, like, there's a lot of training that the foundational layer LLM companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and a bunch of others that we're using are doing in the background, and we can already catch some stuff, and then we add on top of it, right? So to answer your question, like we can do both. The focus initially has been on the application layer. Now we're expanding at the infrastructure layer as well.
It's interesting. So I think this solved the which thing should you pitch for me. Other than the fact that I think this does pigeonhole you into people who like the blockchain space. But I think the reason it pigeonholed it for me is because ultimately it sounds like you're partnering or, kind of learning from or using more generic products and integration when you get to the stuff that isn't, kind of more specific to blockchain and blockchain applications or blockchain protocols. And over time, that might change. But I think the reason in the initial pitch to not say AI security engineer in the middle and kind of live a little bit more is because it also allows you to take advantage of something that I think you're going to want to take advantage of, which is to say we're in a second phase, or I don't know, maybe this is the 19th phase of Web3 that has 25 lives, and we're in whatever life it's in. And in this moment, there are going to be a lot of people trying to build applications and do it in the right way for this next chance that we're going to get for this market to exist. And more important than ever is going to be the security of these applications, the utility of these applications. And so for people building in that space, they're going to place more importance than they did last time on this part of the challenge of security, of compliance, you might not get in some things, but, and the whole point being you then get to make that part of your pitch. The zeitgeist is part of your pitch, which is, if you don't know it, politics of Web3 are about to reverse in another direction. We're going to see a revitalization of a lot of these products. And what we're focused on is saying, okay, the reason this went wrong last time is because this is a more exposed technology. Right. This technology enables actually a little bit too much. You don't need to say that because you might not believe that. But that might actually be a cute line for you, right? Of like, it enables too much in the sense that and a lot of the ways that things went wrong last time is because we don't know how to use these products properly, or the world's users don't know how to use them properly, or application developers don't know how to build properly to make sure that things were ultimately secure and safe to use and trusted to use. And so we're focused on helping developers in that realm pass a threshold. Right. And if they can pass that threshold and be one of these trusted products, then they get to become Coinbase. Because Coinbase is, as many issues as Coinbase has, one of one almost. You tell me if there's another product that has as much trust related to its brand. I know a lot of people don't like the centralization in the Web3 space, but as far as like a normie-friendly product that feels secure and safe to use, it's next to none.
I love that. I like the separation into phases. Yeah. It allows you like to build into your kind of like storytelling. You mentioned I think Coinbase is doing like something that not a lot are doing in the space, but a lot more will do down the line, which is spending a lot of like money and resources in security, and they build that trusted brand. My co-founder was there before, where we see some of the processes that they have internally, and what they're doing is not something like that new. Like they're taking Web 2 processes and frameworks, and they're applying it to Web 3, right? And then obviously they're adding on top of it, and there's some certain things that don't apply to Web 3 that apply to Web 2, but whatever. What eventually I think will need to happen, as you correctly mentioned, is better security tools and processes to be like integrated in like new protocols and companies. Because like it's the only way this company will grow.
Yep.
And it's the only way that traditional financial institutions will actually, or more traditional enterprises will actually do anything in this space. They're not going to do anything if every single week there's a hack.
Well, it's because the worst feeling for anybody who tried Web3 products was not, I mean, people also felt bad when there are rug pulls and when there's a market that turned on them. But I think the feeling that probably was most visceral and probably caused the most consternation that then led to a bunch of other bad feelings was hacks, was when it goes wrong on a technical perspective. That's probably the worst gut feeling you cause in the ecosystem. So helping people avoid that, I think it's worthy. Again, Web3, I don't know. But I think it makes a whole ton of sense. Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Good job.
Thank you.
I'll give my takeaways and then we can wrap here. It's interesting to think about a lot of these companies doing world building as the way I got excited. Because ultimately, the challenge for most initial pitches, whether again it's a first meeting, you actually get stuck in an elevator, you're at a networking event, is can I get you to understand how important I think the problem is? Because if I can get you there, we can then again disagree on a whole lot else. And I think that's an okay place to be as a founder, is like, okay, I share a vision of truth with you about why the world is broken. You might eventually not vote for my solution. You might think my pathway isn't worthwhile. You might think I'm running the wrong set of experiments. But I can first establish the world, then at least we can have the rest of the conversation. Even with this last pitch, again, I am the most skeptic of Web3 and blockchain, and yet still I can go, look, the world exists in a lot of ways for an AI security engineer that's particularly focused in Web3 and blockchain applications to make a whole lot of sense from a capitalistic perspective. Then it's like, okay, do I want to be on this journey with you because I like the space, because of the go-to-market, because of the particular competitors? Sure, lose on those fronts. It's much better as a founder to get no's in places where you kind of can feel and recognize those no's. I think a lot of the founders today actually did that because of the world building, because they established, here's a little bit what's broken, here's a little bit of the truth, or we established it maybe through conversation. And that's my call to action for a lot of founders figuring out the early pitch. Obviously, if you have a very obvious pain and everyone's going to understand as soon as you say it, okay, you don't need to tell me more. You don't want to spend more than 10 seconds on world building. So sometimes your world building is just saying the few sentences that get you on the same page. But for most founders and most startups, it's going to require more than that. So spend a little bit more time on that, and I think it'll do you well. With that in mind, that was the feedback loop. That was 7 awesome founders. Shout out to all the founders who got up on stage and pitched their vision of the future. Also, shout out to the feedback loop team. If you aren't already, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, all your favorite podcasting platforms. Thanks all so much for coming, and thanks again to the founders. Have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday.